Richard Walden Yates was born on February 3, 1926, into the very staple of American middle class in Yonkers, New York. Now, his father, rarely spoken of, was one Vincent Yates, an electric light salesman who separated from Richard's mother when Richard was just 4 years old. Now, Richard's mother, Ruth Walden Maurer, most often called Dookie, was an aspiring, though unsuccessful, sculptress. Well, even before Vincent left, money was a constant issue for the small family, continuously moving around the West Village of Manhattan. Now, during this time, Richard, who was quite shy, was forced to pose naked as a faun for a series of statues that his mother wanted to sculpt. Now, trapped in a deep struggle with alcoholism at the time, Richard recalls the time his mother left vomit on the pillow next to him after a heavy drinking binge. Now, despite incidents like this, he never considered her a bad mother. Well, things only became more bleak after Vincent departed. And between Ruth's unstable economy and drinking problem, money was scarce. The mirage of success, however, was as important as ever. So perhaps for this reason, Richard attended a horribly competitive prep school in New England during his formative years. It was painfully clear that he was the poorest of the students and was unfortunately ridiculed and bullied for it. On the upside, he honed some writing skills by editing the school magazine, a craft that would later change the path of his life. For much of his early life, his mother was his only comfort for the most part. His sister provided some comfort, but she was more of a daddy's little girl, however. Thus, following the divorce, sought to be with her father regularly. Richard, on the other hand, never really knew his father. So he chose to stay at home with his mother, who was sort of a kindred soul and temperament. And there it was, the height of the Great Depression. Money was as short as it ever had been. The father provided whatever small amount he could spare in the way of alimony and child support. However, Mom insisted on a higher standard than her economy could sustain. She would rent large apartments in upper-class New York neighborhoods she couldn't afford. Thus, when money ran out, like it always did, she would sponge off friends and neighbors until there was no money left to borrow and was then forced to move. Now, rather than wallow in the misery of their chaotic lives, Mother Yates encouraged her children to look at their lives as an adventure of sorts, telling them that it was the three of them against the world. And their favorite leisure activity was going to the movies. Now, Richard discontinued the habit of watching movies entirely as an adult. He went so far as to not even plugging in a TV set that was once left to him. He could, however, give detailed renditions of the movies he'd seen as a youngster in the late 1930s. In a 1981 essay, he mentioned how books wasn't his thing as a child, how reading was such hard work for him that he tended to avoid it whenever possible. Movies, on the other hand, gave what he needed, providing a great deal of story in an easily digestible format, as well as a good place to hide from the stresses of everyday real life. As a teenager, he joined the army, serving as an infantryman during the Second World War, surviving stints in both Germany and France. Now, during his service, he perfected his smoking and heavy drinking habits. Well, out of the army and back to New York City, he was conflicted. Take advantage of the GI Bill and attend college, which was the initial plan, or get on with his writing career. The decision? Put off college, read as much as possible, and lead the life of a quote-unquote knockabout intellectual, very much like his protagonist, Frank Wheeler, in Revolutionary Road. Now, later in life, he would regret not having attended college. His real reason turned out to be fear. Fear due to a low IQ score of 109 he received while in the Army. He didn't want to run the risk of further failure and thus decided to better himself by taking evening courses in creative writing at Columbia University. Now, whether or not these classes had any impact on his later writing remains unclear. Anyway, inspired by the early characters of Ernest Hemingway, Yates landed a job in Food Field Reporter as a trade journalist, which helped him move he and his mother into an apartment on Hudson Street. Then, in early 1947, he was hired as a rewrite man on the financial news desk of the United Press, a big move up, a weekly salary of $54. Things seemed to be improving. His daily routine was also somewhat appealing on account of its simplicity. He'd report in at the Daily News building at 10 a.m. in suit and tie, listen to the racket of teletypes and Wall Street cronies for 2 hours or so, then adjourn to a bar on 42nd Street where fat slabs of roast beef were free with dime beer, followed at last by a long afternoon of punching out leads until it was 6:30 and time to go home. An easy day-to-day routine. The only problem, he only had the vaguest idea of what he was supposed to be doing. During this same time period, he had the pleasure of meeting Sheila Bryant. They married on June 8, 1948. Well, after 2 daughters and a tumultuous decade-long marriage, they divorced in 1959. However, it might very well be argued that this marriage, his keen ear for dialogue, as well as his relationship with his own mother, would help him whip his writing chops into shape and create his first novel, Revolutionary Road.